is Roneet Merkin. I am from Florida International University. I wear a lot of hats on campus, both literally and figuratively. I am an instructor in the math department. I am the program director for one of our math labs. I'll say 1.5 of our math labs because we're building a third one, and it's a sort of a joint venture there. And I'm the coordinator for MGF 1106, which is finite math, as well as MGF 1107, which is social choice math. So what I have been doing for the past few years is working to turn these classes into both hybrid classes as well as active learning classes, and there's a big push for that on campus. And we've actually been fully hybrid for both of those sections for the past 2 years. And this past summer, we also worked on MAC 1105, which is college algebra, to sort of make changes to that as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is this is a very kind of wordy title. I'm not exactly sure 100%. I wrote it, but I'm not 100% sure what it means. But basically, it's how to effectively create an active learning hybrid class, because especially when it comes to math, that's a complicated thing to do. So one of the reasons that we moved to do this was sort of this desire to create this more engaged classroom. I'd been teaching for about 17 years and thought I was doing a fantastic job at it. My husband watched me once in a classroom and he said it's like mental gymnastics with me as a teacher in front, right? You're up, you're doing something, you're down, you're doing something, you're up, you're doing something, you're down. And I realized, though, that there was a lot more that I could be doing to actually engage my students, right? So we had several workshops run by the Center for the Advancement of Teaching, where we learned a lot about sort of what it's like for a student when they're sitting in a lecture versus what it's like when they're actively engaged. And the difference is enormous. So I had this desire, like, how can I switch this up? And actually, smack in the middle of one of my semesters, I started making changes and writing these worksheets to say, you know what, I'm going to get my students doing something in class. They're not just going to sit and listen to me talk about it. Yes, I can talk about it and I can try to make it as engaging as I want to, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to get anything or get what I want them to get from the classroom. In our university, there's also this 30-30-40 goal to try and get more hybrid classes, 30 online, 30 hybrid, and then 40 face-to-face classes. So we're trying to convert those classes that we can into hybrid class. And I'm a big believer in hybrid, but I don't believe that every class should be a hybrid class. There are some classes for which it just doesn't work. You need more face-to-face time with your students. And in the process of sort of trying to re-engage students, what I realized is if I want them doing more work in class, then I have to have them doing more work out of class. Because you can't have both. You can't say, I'm going to come in and we're just going to cover 3 things without this sort of need to come into class with something and need to do more work outside of class. There has to be a give and take there. And then the last one, why not, really just comes with having been teaching for enough years that I was really looking to do something different. I was looking to switch something up and say, how can I do this? There are a lot of components and different classes require different components. So for example, in all of our classes have pre-class assignments, which we're going to talk about in a minute. In-class worksheets that we write in order to get the students engaged, not just, it could be just putting a problem on the board that they're working on as a group. It could be something more detailed than that, and different classes have different things. For example, my finite math class has in-class worksheets that are really instructional. The students read, they understand, they're learning something in the process, they're answering questions. Our social choice math, and our college algebra is largely like that as well. Our social choice math class is much more just, come in, you've learned it already, now let's talk about it, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Homework, students need to go home, they need to practice what they've done in class. Group work within the class. They can work individually, but it's really the idea is to get them to engage with one another so that if they get stuck, they don't skip it and move on, that they're asking their groups. So sometimes I'll walk over to a group and one student will ask me a question and they'll get it right and I'll say, great, now explain that to your group, and I'll walk away, right? Leaving them sort of like, okay, I'll do that now, sure. And I will harass my students to join a group, right? So I'll walk over and I'll say, oh, look around, see if anybody's sitting by themselves. If they are, grab them, invite them into your group and join them. And every once in a while, what I will say about group work is we do end up with one or two who are very, very reluctant, and you learn pretty quickly, like, I'm just going to kind of leave that student alone. You have to sort of test the water a little bit with that student just to see, because there are a few who really cannot handle it, and that's fine as well. Learning assistants, we have learning assistants. We have a huge learning assistant program at FIU, and we utilize them in our classroom. I have 120 students. I have 5 learning assistants. We have classes with 150. They have 6 to 8. I have found that a good ratio is when you have a class of 50 students, 2 LAs is ideal. Yourself and 2 LAs walking around. That tends to be a pretty good ratio. And one key also is that our learning assistants also work in our math lab. So they are trained every week. They have learning sessions every week, 90 minutes, where they learn the content for the next week. And what's ideal is that the students make this connection between the math lab is where I see my LAs, and the classroom also is where I see my LAs. So there's this continuity for the students. And we have our Mastery Math Lab. We have 3 of them now. We have one on our North Campus. Students have a requirement every week to come and do a certain number of hours, 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on the class. They get help from the learning assistants, from their instructors that are there. They can work in groups. We have review sessions that we hold in the lab before exams. We have now pre-class workshops every week that they can do to work on the pre-class material before they come to class. So all of these are the things that we've put together, and they really have to work together in order for this to work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to stop talking, and that's what I usually tell my students in the first day of class when I introduce myself. I talk for a little while, and then I say to them, this is about all you're going to hear me talk the entire semester. I'm never going to talk for this long. So this is all you get from me for right now. And what I want you guys to do is on your tables, there are 2 worksheets there. One of them is a photocopy from the book, which is going to help you to do the pre-class assignments. So the pre-class assignments, we use Canvas as our LMS. The pre-class assignments are available there. The students have access to their textbooks. And what they do is they do this assignment. They upload the assignments. They're due the night before class at midnight. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys to take a few minutes and go ahead and do this assignment, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So take a few minutes, do the assignment. I should say, by the way, it comes from my social choice math class. And if you have any questions, ask your group mates.
So you're just writing down.
I tried to fit everything onto one page, so I didn't kill my printer. That's really what it came down to.
I have only one.
Actually, so that's why it's here, only because, oh, maybe. By the way, I have no idea what the answer is. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. Even if you're not done, that's absolutely fine. So my students upload this the night before. What I usually tell my students, actually, is that if you upload it early, I'm happy to grade it, and you're welcome to fix it up until the deadline. That's largely because I have time to do that. I always tell my instructors, you don't have to do that. That does not have to be the policy in your classroom. But for me, I find that it's a good way of letting the students, A, boost their grades for little things, and B, also just gives them the opportunity to sort of make a mistake and check their work, because we know that we're grading things and we're writing comments and they're probably never looking at it again. So if they're worried about the grade aspect of it and I give them a 1.9, these are 2 points. They're graded out of 2 points, pre-class assignments. And sometimes I'll just give them a 1.9 because they've made a silly mistake, or they've made a mistake that I really want to sort of make sure that they pay attention to this. Like, this is an important point, make sure you see that. So the students who go back in and they read my comments and they redo it, for me, I feel like, wow, okay, they've learned something, hopefully, in the process of actually fixing this assignment and redoing this assignment. So pre-class assignments are graded out of 2 points. I skim them when I grade them. I'm like, no, okay, good. Like, that's how I grade them. They're not intended to be, they're really intended to be largely assignments that are for effort. But if I do see glaring mistakes, I try to, put something in there that says, hey, wait a second, please go back and look at this. So before I talk about this, what I want you guys is to turn it over and answer these few questions. And you can discuss it with your group if you want to. The first one is, what will students gain from this assignment? What will you gain from the assignment? And we can you can talk about the last one, but I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So turn it over, write it down with your pen if you have one, and think about it for a minute or two, discuss it with your group. What do you think students gain from doing this assignment, and what do you think the instructor gains from this assignment? They're working on this worksheet, and the, what's it called, is sort of a piece from the textbook. Please swap these out, because we go through them, and there's, you know. Okay, so you've had a few minutes to think about this, so let's see what you guys came up with. What will students gain from this assignment? What do you guys think? I'll say raise a hand, but you know, you can just really don't have to do that. So what do we got? Yeah.
Basically, critical thinking skills.
Okay.
We discussed that. Self-learning and how to focus on the process and learn for conceptual understanding rather than just how to get to the answer.
Okay, good. I like that. What else?
And we thought engagement, so they'll be engaged before,
Mm-hmm.
so they're not seeing the material for the first time when they get into class.
Okay, excellent. They're not seeing it for the first time. Yeah.
Confidence in knowing that you at least have some fundamental understanding before you get there.
Okay, good. I like that. What else? Anything else, guys? Yeah. I didn't hear you. Sorry. Someone from your table, yes.
They will start learning fiscal responsibility about what's going on now. You know, those credit card examples, the credit card.
Right.
They're being, you know,
Shoved on them on campus, yes.
paying the minimum and thinking about their student loans. So real world application.
Yes, excellent. And by the way, it's one of the reasons I love this class. When I've been to other places, they're like, what is social choice math? What does that mean? And I always say the first time I taught this class, this is my little segue, sorry, it terrified me. I'm like, what is this that I'm teaching them? But this actually is, I think, the best math class we have, because I really have students every semester who walk away and say, I actually learned something useful in this class, because they did. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But those are all really good answers, yeah.
This example is from the social choice math.
Yes.
Is it possible for those students to slowly but surely derive this formula?
Oh, no. I don't know that I could slowly but surely derive that formula. I wouldn't even try.
This is step by step. Admittedly, you couldn't do it in 5 or 10 minutes.
Right.
It could take a full class to derive this slowly but surely. And it's just a bunch of terms, and then in the end, you just bring them all over to one side, and that's where the denominator comes from.
Right.
But if you do them one by one to begin with, you could do it slowly but surely.
Right.
Again, these students don't necessarily have extensive math background, so it would have to be slow. Would that help them understand this, or is it just not possible with these students?
So anything is possible with the students. I just don't know that I would take the time to do it with these students. I don't know that there's any value in them learning to derive this particular math formula. We actually give them the formulas not labeled, but we give them the formulas on the test, because I say to them, I don't need you memorizing. Memorizing these formulas doesn't do anybody any good. I don't label them, so they have to look and say, wait, how do I find the loan formula? How do I find the, you know, they have to be familiar with them. But I really don't think that I would take the time ever to go through it with them, because I don't think that it would really, the value that they get is the understanding that they get after using it.
Well, if I may ask, I haven't taught this course, and you have. If you derive the formula step by step, and admittedly it'll take a long time because these students don't have an extensive background, so it could take an entire class period for this calculation. But if you derive it, they will then understand the importance of shopping around for lower interest rate, rather than just having it as one term that's buried in here along with lots of other ones.
So one of the things that we do that you will see is that we actually have them compare and contrast different interest rates. So I think that they actually get a better feel for it. For example, the question, the fourth question here is about the 15-year versus the 30-year. They're going to get a better understanding of it looking at their final numbers and saying, oh, I see the difference here, versus looking at, for example, when we get into mortgages and we talk about, okay, well, what is the total payback? And they say, wow, I borrowed $300,000 and I'm actually paying the bank $700,000. That is far more eye-opening to them than can you derive this formula? Because again, it is a math class, but we're much more concerned about the application of it, where they take it, what they get from it, than can they derive this formula. Not to mention, by the way, it's hybrid. I have 14 classes the entire semester. I don't think I would take one to derive a formula, in all honesty. Like, I just don't have the time. I might say to a student, if you want to understand where this comes from, come talk to me. I'm happy to show you, but I've never had a student ask me, actually, where the formula comes from. Okay, so that's what students gain from the assignment. The other thing, by the way, that I didn't hear anybody say is it actually gets them in the textbook. So it refers to a specific page in the textbook. It has them looking up a formula in the textbook, which has its own value in itself. It says, okay, if I want to find something, there is a resource for me. It's not just, I'm going to Google this and find out the answer. It's saying to them, look at the chart in the middle of page, right? It says, open up your textbook. Because, you know, we always send emails. This is how you find your textbook online, because they have an e-text. And then we'll hear, oh, I didn't know I could have access to the textbook online. So this really gets them in there and saying, look in the textbook, find the answers. You can find these answers on your own. You have the ability to do that. So what do you gain from the assignment? That's more interesting from my perspective. What do you guys gain from the assignment? Yeah?
We talked about getting students actually ready to classwork and giving you idea about what they're struggling with, so you can probably focus your time in class on that topic only, or not spend the whole time talking about the whole thing, but just the area that you feel they are confused about.
Excellent. Yes. Good. What else? Yeah?
So there's no bad question, but you probably would get better questions in class.
Okay, that's interesting. More focused questions. Right. Okay, good. Yeah?
The students have a mental model of this concept before they arrive in class, so there can be adjustments made to that mental model, and students will realize that there's something wrong with mental model based on working with their group.
Good. I like that a lot, actually. I always think about it from the other perspective, which is correcting the mistakes that they make, and I've never really thought about it from that perspective of saying, you did a great job on this, nice job, you know what you're doing. I like that. Good. Anything else?
I was thinking that in my case, I would get to know the way the students think in my class.
Okay, good. So you have an idea of what they're thinking. Good. Anybody else want to add something? So one of the most practical things that you gain is time. I do not walk into class and put this formula on the board. My assumption is you've all looked at it before you've come to class. So I'm not explaining what Y is, what N is, what R is. I'm not wasting 20 minutes of my time putting this formula on the board, doing an example for them. I'm not doing that, right? I am walking in and I'm assuming you guys did this, and now we're going to work with it. One of the I'm not going to say mistakes. One of the things that we learned was we had them turn it in the first semester or two. We had them turn it in at the beginning of class. But what we noticed was that, okay, wait a second. Students are actually sitting here scribbling and doing it like 5 minutes before class starts. That doesn't help, right? So you need to have some sort of system where they can upload their things ahead of time. Upload their assignments ahead of time. Midnight the night before, again, is usually a good time if you want to make it 8 p.m. or 10 p.m., whatever that might be. You can always expect that you're going to get that email in the morning at 12:04 that says, Professor Merkin, I had trouble with my computer. Will you accept this? I'm going to email it to you. You know, you're going to have those. That's fine as well. That's up to you what you choose to do with it, because whatever deadline. We tried like a 2 a.m. deadline one semester. It really didn't make a difference. We got the email at 2:03, right? So that was the way it worked. It just didn't matter what time you make that deadline. And the other thing that it gains you is this idea that when you walk into class, students know they have to have done this. The biggest mistake you can make is to walk in and start writing the formula on the board. So one of my colleagues that I work closely with is doing his master's right now in Japanese studies. And he said something interesting to me in the second week. He said, my professor made a classic mistake. I said, what? She assigned reading, okay? And when I came to class, she started talking about the reading and explaining the reading. And he looked at me and said, I'm never doing another reading in her class again, because she's just going to talk about it, right? So students are going to learn very quickly, even if it's worth 5% of their grade, which the pre-class assignments are. If you come into class and you start explaining the worksheet and you start going through it and talking about the answers and what they are, there's no value in it to them. So you really need to say, students are going to do this. I'm going to assume that you know it. Now, it's imperative that you look at a few of them before you come to class so that you can then talk about it. Because the other piece of this that's important is you have to tie it into your class time. If you never mention the pre-class assignments and you never talk about it or refer to it, there's also no value in it for the students. So what I might do is I might walk into class, and again, maybe I've only graded 5 of them, maybe I've done this worksheet so many times I know what my students are going to say at this point in time, and that's fine. But I might refer to it, and I walk in and say, okay, so let's talk for a second about what you did in your pre-class assignment. One of your questions was about which is more important when taking out a loan, monthly payments or total interest paid? Because I found it very interesting what you guys had to say. So what I want you guys to do is, in your groups, I want you to discuss which do you think and which did you put down as being more important, right? Is it the total loan amount that you paid, or is it the monthly payments? So take a minute and discuss that, and discuss what it was that you wrote in your pre-class assignments, assuming you did them, and then we'll talk about it together. So go ahead and do that now. Somebody who hasn't spoken yet, yes.
We said that total interest paid is more important, assuming you can afford the
Okay, fine. By the way, I'm okay with the caveat. That works for me. That's fine. Okay. Okay, what else? What else did you guys say? Yeah.
Your monthly payment is constrained by your budget.
Right. Right. So a lot of students go for the total amount. Right? That's much, oh my God, I don't want to pay the bank back $300,000. But they're not thinking about what they can actually afford every month. So this leads to a conversation about, well, where do you want to live? Right? Do you want to live in a place where you're paying, you know, $7,000 a month in rent? Do you think you, or mortgage? Do you think you can afford that? Like, what kind of schools do you want for your kids? So it sort of opens up that conversation. Right? So that's what happens in this process. So what we're going to do next, so once we've sort of had that conversation and we've opened it up and the students have discussed it, we move to the in-class worksheets. So I am going to, they're not on your tables yet, I'm going to pass these out for you guys, if I can find them. And I'm going to enlist my colleague, who is my co-lab director, and he's going to help me here and pass these out, because I can.
Thank you so much.
So now, the pre-class assignments, they are meant to be individual, but they don't have to be individual, meaning students, they upload them individually, but that doesn't mean that they can't work on them with other people. We encourage them to go to the math lab and get help while they're working on them. But these assignments really are meant to be worked on in class, in a group. There you go. You are welcome. Okay, did you guys get one? Yes, you're good. Okay. You're going to need the textbook for this as well, by the way. Yes. Oh, haha. Thank you. There you go, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, raise your hands. I'm happy to come around and help.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I do notice, by the way, is because we always try to include in these worksheets questions that get the students to think. Why do you think that? What do you prefer that? They try to skip over them. And they just try to do the calculations. And we walk around and we say, no, don't skip this question. This is an important question, right? So as we're looking, don't they always try to just jump to where are the numbers and what can I do, right? So take a minute and write down what do you think the students gain from class time from doing this? And then what do you think that the instructor gains from class time? Okay, so those are two important pieces to think about. So take a minute and do that. What do you guys think? What do you guys think students gain from class time, from this kind of assignment? Because we'll do, in a 75-minute class, we'll do 2 or 3 worksheets per class, pretty much. And we'll do this, by the way, where they'll do a little bit, and if I see like mistakes that are going on, I'll stop and I'll bring the class, hey guys, wait a second, pause what you're doing, right? And let's talk about this and then go back to working, right? So that's sort of what we do in class. So what do you think students gain from doing this in class? What do we got?
We taught active engagement in class.
Yep, active engagement in class. Yes, it's just more fun. Class is more interesting for them to show up to, right? They enjoy being in class. And we ask them that every semester, by the way. You know, what are their feelings about in class? What else?
How to work in collaboration.
How to work in collaboration, that's very important, right? And it's important, our job as well, to make sure that they're working in collaboration. Like I said, great, you got that, now explain it to your group mate, right? So that's an important piece of it. What else? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the assignment in general creates empathy with the students. I mean, I think it gets them to understand how people struggle with their own budgets and what have you. Just the assignment in general, and giving them a way to identify why people might struggle with house payments or what have you, or budgeting themselves. So effective learning for sure.
Effective learning. Good. What else? Yeah.
This opens room for extra work outside. If you can extend this to a project or something, or writing.
Which we do, yes.
That would include like synthesizing the information more and applying it to or see the implications in real world experience.
Yes, exactly. And we do. We have a project that they do, and they have actually conceptual homework, which if I have time for, I will pass out, that they do every week as well, that now says, because homework is important, right? They have to go home and practice. There's no question about that. And so it sort of tries to get them to practice, again, not just per se the numbers, as much as, you know, what are your thoughts on this? Okay, so what do you guys gain from this? What do the instructors gain from doing this?
Well, they pretty much said some of the things, but with one activity, your students are learning, my students are learning so many different concepts.
Good, you can pull a lot of different things into one activity. Yes?
I want to say one more thing. We're doing some stuff with our GP, and if we have students learning this, then it translates into my class where we talk about issues with the Great Depression, right? Where they can start looking at problems of credit and problems of why people experience, or even the Great Recession we just went through. You know, so then you're getting them to take those skills, apply them into into a historical foundation as well, where they're able to start, you know, connecting those dots between the two. So definitely.
Okay, excellent. What else? What else do you gain? Yeah.
It's embarrassing, but some of the times I learn from them a lot.
Yep.
So the way they think is very different.
Right.
Sometimes I didn't look at it from that perspective.
Right.
And in my field, it's not complete engineering or science, it's computer science. So everything is new, everything can be recreated, rethought about it. So I learn from my own students,
right.
because they have different experiences.
And you can also, by the way, learn if your worksheets are working or not, by the way, because you can see that very quickly. I didn't mean to write that. Yeah.
Yes, I want to revert to the first question just for a bit.
Sure.
Because all of our students are owners of shiny iPhones, et cetera, of which many of the companies, they don't buy it right out. They pay an interest, or they have like a phone mortgage.
Right.
And so that's something that they can relate to
Right.
instantly, that they're paying
Right.
this, and that the upgrade plan,
Right.
they even have the upgrade plans and other mechanisms to keep them with the bling, so to speak.
Right.
That they be more conscious of that.
Right.
My bling doesn't have to
Right.
be shiny.
But you know what? That's a help for the instructor as well, because one of the things that I think about, you notice it's asking them to look something up. They all have their technology in the classroom. At least let them put it to a good use, right? They'll say, well, how do I know that? Well, use your phone. You're using it anyway. But instead of being on Snapchat, Google, housing prices in Houston, right? And that sort of gets them to use it and to engage with it in that sense, because it's there. We can. 15 years ago, it was no phones allowed out in the classroom, right? But it's just, unfortunately, you can't really have that be the case anymore at this point. The walking around, as you guys saw, what did I do? I walked around. Are there any questions? Looking over your shoulders. What are you guys doing? And that's an important piece of it as well, because it's that human aspect. I am not this person standing up here in front of the classroom just talking to you. I'm walking around. I'm engaging with you. I am approachable. You can come ask me questions. There's no stupid questions, right? You can say whatever you want. And it also, as the instructor, gives me a good sense of, where are you guys at? Are you way off base? Is this group working really slowly? Is this group just chatting about the movies they saw over the weekend, right? So it gives me a feeling for, and especially, by the way, if you have 120 students like I do in my finite math class, I don't know any of them, right? So at least I know their faces, like I'm starting to learn. And I'm also learning, by the way, are the groups working? Because I don't make groups. I let them make their own groups. But if I see that, you know what, this is not working, I will come in the next class and I'll have them count off numbers and say, all the ones get up, you go over here, all the twos get up. So if the groups are working well, that's great. But if they're not, it tells me that in the next class, I really need to come in and I need to switch things up and they need to get out of their comfort zones because it's been 4 weeks, they're very comfortable in their group, but that doesn't mean their group is working. It's also the social aspect, right? It gives the students the chance to meet other students. We hear all the time, FIU, we're a commuter college, students feel very isolated. I come to class, nobody knows me, I go to work, I go home. It gives students the opportunity to meet other students in their class. Oh, hey, we're in that huge bio class together. Let's exchange numbers. Let's form a WhatsApp group to work together. Right? So I think that that's an important piece of it. You're forcing them to be social, which really they might not be very comfortable with, but it gives them the opportunity. And then switching it up sort of starts it all over again, right? Introduce yourselves. I'm switching up groups today. Introduce yourselves. Talk for a minute. I'll get some things done up here, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's an important piece of this. Yes.
You mentioned that you'll maybe periodically interrupt the groups if
Yes.
things go in a certain direction that might be off track, or you see the results kind of being maybe wrong, or you need to make a correction. Can you talk a little bit about the balance and how often you do that, and how often, like number of times, or how much percentage of time you might do it?
Maybe once per worksheet, because, and usually it's the same thing when you're teaching the same worksheet over and over again each semester. I mean, we make changes to them, but you sort of know, like, this is the mistake that I'm going to see. So maybe once per worksheet, maybe twice per worksheet. If I see that students are making a common mistake, I really don't have a number, I don't time it, I don't even think about it. It's just what happens naturally from walking around the classroom and seeing. And if I've answered the same question 3 times, I will stop and I will stop the class at that point and just redirect them for a minute and then move forward. It really just depends. I'm not thinking about it. There are classes where I talk for such a small amount of time in class because it's going well and everything's going smoothly. It's pretty much. So I think I'm running out of time. I'm not sure. I am running out of time. So I'm not going to hand out the conceptual homework, which then takes it to the next step. So this is the post-class, right? So just briefly, your thoughts then on homework, right? So without discussing it as your group, right? Imagine I'm running out of time in my class. I'm trying to shove in the last 5 minutes. So post-class, what do you think students get out of the post-class work that they do? What do they get out of it? Okay, good. They should be able to reflect on it. Excellent. Yes? Reinforcement, right? Okay. What else? Students are different learners. Some of them learn while you're teaching it in the classroom. Some of them just write things down and need to think about it later. It depends on the kind of students they are, right? What do you think you get? Oh, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say that they don't have this sense of, I've got to do this busy homework. It's
Right.
sort of an aha. Yeah, you just got overwhelming for the students. Right. It's like, where sometimes students think homework is busy work,
Right.
the way you.
Some of it is busy work, I will say. Some of it is just do this so that you can do it, yes.
But maybe just a perception change.
Right,
Maybe
right.
a perception about it.
Right. Yeah. And what do you get out of it? What do you guys get out of students doing out-of-class work? Which, in my opinion, I think you have to grade. I think it has to be something that is worthwhile. We kind of try to find that sweet spot. Usually 5% seems to be enough to get students to do things, 3% not so much, right? So it just depends on what it is. Yeah, sorry.
So basically to give them some inducement to actually practice it and learn it and hopefully absorb it before the test hits.
Before the test hits, right? And then they're emailing you at 2 o'clock in the morning and asking you questions. Exactly. What else? What else?
I think you will learn enough from this assessment so that you can tweak your future instruction.
Right.
And adjust what you're going to do.
Right. If all the students are getting the same things wrong and they're having an issue with it, you know what I did in class really didn't work very well, right? And I need to go back and think about it. Okay. So, just very briefly, how do we do this? It really requires a backwards design. You need to think about the class as a whole. What are my objectives for this class? What do I want this unit to be about? How am I going to then create my in-class work, create my pre-class work, create my post-class work? It has to flow. Students have to see, and it doesn't mean it has to flow from one testing unit to another, but there has to be a flow that students see this in class, pre-class, in class, out of class, that it just sort of keeps connecting so that there's this connection that goes on. Collaboration is important. You can't do this by yourself. I mean, you can, but it's easier if you have somebody that you can work with, or 2 or 3 people that you can work with and say, is this working? Does this work? Can you look this over? Because I'm sure I made mistakes on it, right? And you have that collaboration and you have the buy-in from other faculty members who say, hey, I love this. I want to do this also. Revision, feedback and revision. Nothing that you ever do is going to be correct. Certainly not the first time around, and probably not the 10th time around either. There's always going to be changes. Because, by the way, it does get stale after a while. So there are things to think about. How can I make this a little bit different? Even if it may not be stale to your students, because it's their first time taking the class, if it's stale to you, that's going to kind of come across in the classroom. So you have to think about that as well. And administrative support. That's an important piece of it. There has to be those people above you who say, this is great, keep doing this, right? That's an important piece of it. Is it working? This question says, how did the online resources contribute to your learning in this course, right? The majority of students say they were very important for me. That means that the stuff that we're giving them to learn the videos and the pre-class assignments and that stuff, it's very important. How much did attending class contribute to learning in this course? So clearly we need to do a little bit more work in this, but still the majority of students say that attending class was very important to me. So class time was valuable for our students. How well did in-class activities help you understand the course material? Again, the majority of students say the in-class material was very important to them. And just briefly, you can take a look at what our pass rates have been in finite math. The blue here are those that are non-mastery and non-hybrid. The orange is where we started having the math lab requirement and the hybrid, and you can see that we've managed to keep it certainly well above what the non-mastery was. And for social choice as well, we've managed to keep it above, and we're always working to create to move it higher. But more interesting to me than pass rates actually are the drop rates. Right? So you can see that our drop rates have significantly decreased over time. Students are staying in class. They're finding class time engaging. Right? They want to be there. It's become more interesting to them. And I know that universities, we all look at what are the pass rates, what are the pass rates. I really think we should be looking at what are the drop rates, right? How many of your students are staying in class and completing the assignments? Because I think that says a lot more about what's happening in your classroom and what's happening in your course. And I think I'm out of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
These 2 group of people are different, right? Like hybrid students.
We don't have any what we call face-to-face full-time social choice, finite math, or college algebra classes anymore. They're all hybrid classes, which means they do 50% of their work in class, in theory, and 50% of their work out of class. Oh. Yes, they are. So for finite math, we actually started the mastery while the non-mastery was still going on, so we kind of had the half and half, and you can see that's the overlap there. For social choice, we really just kind of cut it off and said, hey, we're just going hybrid with this. Yes?
So then this comparison, I mean, how can you compare 2 different groups? One is doing better than the other, not the same people. So it is not.
Well, it's a different mode of instruction. We're comparing a different mode of instruction over time. We're saying that when in teaching a hybrid class, we retain more of our students. That's the idea there. You're saying it could be just that it's a different group of students, but you could say that, but we've been doing it for 4 semesters. It seems to be You know, first semester I might say maybe it's just a different group, but I feel like we've done it for 2 years already. Maybe that's not enough time. I'll let you know at the end of this semester. Just email me. Yeah.
Do you have any students who come to class unprepared, did not do the pre-class?
Always. Always. If I have 50 students in a class, 36 or 37 of them will do the pre-class assignments.
How do you handle those unprepared?
I email, I text, and at some point I just say, all right, you're not doing it. I mean, at this point I can't do anything about it.
What about in-class time?
I will talk about it. I talked about it. I talked about it last week. I have 120 students in the class. About 96 of them were doing the pre-class work. We're only in week 3, week 4. I said, come on, guys. I say, this is the easiest 5% you could ever get. Just do it. And the next week, I had 104 students do it. So there was a little bit of an increase. My assumption is the rest of them are just not showing up to class. Right? Yes. Yes, sorry.
Are the class sizes here for the finite math, social choice, they're both relatively equal around?
No, finite math is 100 cap, though we've gone up. Social choice is 50. It's a very different class that really requires a smaller, you can't, I try to get them to write things on the board. You can't do that with 100 students in a classroom.
And does each semester data point represent one class?
No, conglomerate of all the classes. Thank you guys very much.